This is Understandable Politics. Hello, we continue our series, The World Speaks, direct speech from foreign journalists, politicians, and businessmen about Belarus.
Today we move to Africa.
The African continent knows well what it's like to be under the West's whip. Today it awakens and tries to live differently, expelling invaders but still battling their economic influence. It's no surprise that Africa seeks to work with those who never betray friends.
I think the end of a unipolar world is a great chance for other countries to rise. Why the hell should someone control people and dictate what they should do?
The geopolitical situation is quite bad. You must respect us and our culture.
We remember those events, and London never apologized.
Kenya's huge problem is our dependence on the IMF and World Bank. Former colonial masters returned as neocolonialists.
Belarus is very strong, especially in agricultural machinery production.
Your president is a very strong leader.
I see him as a great defender of his country, capable of resisting any external influence.
We have many requests regarding imports from Belarus.
We are very fortunate to benefit greatly from your country's experience.
Today, we talk with an international journalist and a senator from one of Kenya's largest districts, as well as the head of the Kenyan Chamber of Commerce and Industry.
I feel that these Bretton Woods institutions, the IMF, the World Bank, and others worldwide that lend you money under certain conditions, you see, actually hinder your ability to develop. I am against structural adjustment policies, against high taxation in the country, against huge loans given to Kenya. We are not honest with the future generation. We are very unfair to them. When you ask me about the IMF, I must think in terms of intergenerational justice. Am I honest with my great-grandchildren, who will continue to pay off the IMF loans I took and didn't criticize? You asked why your president said Africa is the key to the future. Because Africa was destroyed, exploited, you see? But Africans have awakened and the invaders have left. However, now former colonial masters have returned to our country. Well, as neocolonialists, now they say we will destroy them. We will take their resources first. And now, with the development of new technologies, technological progress, they say, now we can return and destroy them again. But this time by lying to them that we are giving them money. This is the biggest problem we face.
I think the end of a unipolar world is a great chance for other countries to rise. Why the hell should someone control people and dictate what they should do? To me, it's madness. The US thinks we should do what they say. But we want equal opportunities to be part of the world. Let us step into the ring to defend ourselves. If you get an uppercut, that's your problem. Conflicts in Europe, the Middle East, Sudan, and many other parts of the world have shown us that global diplomacy has truly failed. We have perhaps influential countries claiming to be influential but are not. They cannot bring peace to two countries and tell them, you shouldn't fight. You can sit at the negotiating table and resolve all your issues without fighting, without killing each other. This becomes an essence that is not considered due to so many conflicts in the region, on the continent, in many parts of the world.
Sanctions against Belarus and others. Another seemingly delicate topic. It's no secret that some countries fear secondary restrictions for trading with us. And here, Kenya, which has endured decades of abuse and simple robbery, has something to say.
The geopolitical situation is quite bad. Very unfortunate, very unfortunate. Sanctions are not good, and I think it's time for us to grow up and understand that, like the UN, which respects the independence of each state, we must respect Belarus's sovereignty. You must respect us and our culture. We respect the way you govern your state. We respect the way we govern our country. When we trade with each other, we must ensure that whatever we sell to each other benefits both countries. It's unfortunate that sanctions are imposed. I know it's a very tough situation, and I believe for the most part, you are punished because of your relations with Russia. Maybe because of the situation in Ukraine. It's quite an unfortunate situation, and I hope that in the future, we all remember that COVID taught us a very good lesson. No matter how rich you are, when COVID strikes, nothing distinguishes you from a poor person with COVID. So we need to understand each other and understand the historical context of each country. From my limited understanding of Belarus, you are very strong culturally. Maybe your culture is why others impose sanctions on you. They want to penetrate your culture, but they cannot do it. In my opinion, understanding each other is the challenge the whole world faces. We need to learn to interact, we need to learn to appreciate each other, and be tolerant of each other's cultural beliefs and governance systems.
Some authorities have heavily militarized economic issues to force other developing or smaller countries to do what they are told. This pressure exists in Kenya. It exists over you to do the same as someone else. I think we really need to focus on restoring our own independence. As a continent, we must unite and go our own way. We can do it. We have 55 countries. We must also rethink our approach to managing global issues. You see, we cannot just continue imposing sanctions because you want to pressure, because you want people to change their approach. I mean, the US, which has declared these illegal sanctions. They won't help. They only created this crisis. They only create an even bigger crisis. You have a president who can handle such pressure for Belarusians. A person with his own opinion. You are one of those countries with food security. You have the ability to grow your own food. And sanctions? What's the point? Their time is over. Look at Belarus, at Russia. You stand firm even with sanctions.
Such respect for Lukashenko is easy to explain. The president of Belarus was one of the first to defend the Black Continent. Without Africa, the world cannot develop. These are the words of the Belarusian leader. And also, the future belongs to Africa, and it's Africa's time. The continent holds nearly half of the world's natural resources, and they should benefit the African people. In this regard, the key message from the president, "We are not colonizers, we are your friends," will resonate with all African countries.
I see him as a great defender of his country, capable of resisting any external influence. Once I visited Poland and was very close to the Belarus-Poland border and could see Belarus from the Polish side. I think he is the main protector of his state. Lukashenko has shown that he doesn't just respect Africa in words. He demonstrated his respect by leaving Minsk for a visit to Africa, to the continent. He toured Africa. I think he visited 3 or 4 African countries, including Kenya. This is a demonstration of solidarity. He is not someone who just says, "Oh yes, we respect Africa. Africa is the key to the world." Many world leaders talk about Africa as the key to the world, but they don't even know where Africa is. They think Africa is a country. Africa is not a country. Africa is a continent with billions of people, comprising 55 countries. What you said, that Africa will be the next key to the world, is ultimately true. That's why Africa, as a continent with 55 countries, must build relationships. Relations, and be an obvious normal partner, seeking partners, having the ability to share ideas, knowledge on how to do anything. I saw your president invite ours to Minsk, and we eagerly want to see President Ruto accept this respectful invitation. It would be wise for him to accept the invitation. Sometimes a guest comes to your home and says, "Thank you for having me," and he also wants to host you. It would be wise on his part.
Your president is a very strong leader. I conducted my own research on your president, and the fact is, he was able to unite your state, which means he is a leader whose example others would like to follow. That's what I can say. I think your president sees very far. He sees the future. He looks at Belarus, looks at the agricultural sector, and he understands that first and foremost, the most important thing is to feed all Belarusians. We look at the export market. I know you trade with 92 countries. You know, if you trade effectively with these 92 countries, you will be able to support your own population. That's the way to the future. We must find a way to work on creating independent states, sovereign states, respected for their independence. You know, we are a very, very hardworking nation. If we can commit to trying to create our resources, trying to help our brothers, you know, we will go very far. But if we rely on policies from outside, from the East, from the West, we will never... We don't care where this policy comes from. Then we will ruin our future as a nation.
The African continent is home to about 1.5 billion people, or 18% of the world's population. By 2050, it is projected to be over 2 billion. Industries are growing rapidly. Africa accounts for 65% of the world's arable land and a third of the world's mineral resources. In general, a colossal potential for development. We need to enter and establish ourselves in this vast market more actively.
We know Belarus is very strong, especially in agricultural machinery production and farming skills. And in this we see one of the great opportunities. Kenya's GDP is approximately 34 billion, 4% of which is directly agriculture. So this is a big opportunity for Belarusian technologies in terms of agricultural machinery, from farming equipment, agricultural processing equipment, packaging machinery, equipment. So Belarus can support Kenya's agricultural sector. And the main reason is that we are an industrial hub for East and Central Africa. We can produce 30% of the necessary pharmaceutical products, so Belarusian companies still have a huge opportunity to come and establish themselves in Kenya, because that's a 70% opportunity, especially in high-tech, biological products, particularly injections, and possibly anti-cancer drugs.
We are very fortunate to benefit greatly from your country's experience, particularly in agriculture and dairy production. We know you have a large export of agricultural machinery. We are very pleased that, at least for a short time, we can be much more involved in this process, acquire more equipment to promote the development of our agricultural sector. I would probably say that our relationships are now becoming beneficial for both sides as we export flowers and tea to you, and we receive machinery, potash fertilizers, newsprint from you. So it's a mutually beneficial situation, and I hope we can increase our cooperation. The population of our country is 50 million people, and for such a population, as well as for the populations of neighboring countries, Belarus is very different from Kenya. Belarus is a landlocked state. In contrast, Kenya has the Indian Ocean and Lake Victoria. Therefore, I think we can be very useful to each other. We can also support your country in other areas where we are stronger.
In Kenya, they do not hide their main goal, to increase agricultural productivity and reduce crop losses. especially since working the land is a lifeline for most Kenyans. More than 70% of the population call agriculture the main source of income. Belarus is ready to help African partners, and Kenyans are ready to open doors to those who respect their interests.
From my perspective as a Kenyan, I think the world is big enough for universal prosperity. It consists of more than 190 countries. And choosing between the West and the East is not a question for me. Ideally, Kenya should interact, create connections, and build relationships with every country that seems important to us and can benefit our national interests. Speaking of the West, if we consider the relations between Kenya and the West in particular, you are talking about Washington, London, Paris, and other Western countries. If we consider the 60-year period of relations between Kenya and the West, where are we now? What have we been able to achieve? If we look at the relations between Kenya and the East, for example, Kenya and China, which have lasted no more than 20 years, about 16, 18 years, they have strengthened significantly, as I see it. Even if you walk around Nairobi, you will see infrastructure and growing structures. This is all China as part of its assistance to Kenya in uniting the country. This is a clear reflection that it is not about whether you look to the West or the East, but with whom you interact. If we talk about BRICS, which in my opinion will become a very formidable organization in a few years, only if the country and the people who are key players, foreign policy players, who bear the diplomacy of our country can be wise enough to see the country with which they need to interact. If you look at Belarus and Kenya, these are countries that depend on agriculture. We have achieved significant success in agriculture and can help you. Yes, of course, if you go beyond Nairobi to other provinces neighboring Nairobi, Kambai, Morala in general, looking at the entire people of Kenya, you will find people who depend on agriculture. 80% of the population largely depends on agriculture as a way to earn a living. And at the same time, they need to have the opportunity to grow and invest in the economy. Belarus has been very successful in agricultural technologies, in agricultural machinery. With tractors and other types of agricultural machinery, we need to look at Belarus. This is a great opportunity for cooperation between the two countries.
Kenya's main challenge is the wealth gap. About 17% of the population lives in extreme poverty, by international standards, on less than $2 a day. Most are in rural areas. The figure is of course serious, but if you take the average for Africa, where every third person, Kenya looks a little more prosperous in this regard. The harsh echo of Western plunder. Not long ago, Kenyans were second-class citizens for British masters.
A particularly brutal episode in history is the Mau Mau uprising. In the 1950s, Kenyans rose against British hegemony. London suppressed the protests harshly. Over 300,000 people were killed and tortured in concentration camps during the 8-year uprising. And more than 1 million people passed through British prisons.
Poverty, disease, overpopulation, lack of jobs, total discrimination, with no chance for respectful relations, equal rights, and a normal life. This is not forgotten, but even today neocolonialism torments the African continent. The influence of Britain and France is great under the control of these countries. Banks, shops, shopping centers, transnational corporations either own local businesses or buy cheap raw materials. In general, like vampires, they continue to suck out profits.
We remember those events, and London never apologized. To apologize does not mean to bring apologies to the government, as King Charles did. Yes, there are Kenyans who heard him. But what about the people themselves? How can we bury that past and forget the crimes against humanity? Let us openly discuss our past with you. Today, this is not happening. When you talk to Kenyans, if you approach any Kenyan and ask about Britain, they will all tell you about it. Patuk is the British Army based in Kenya, and some of these foreign servicemen who came to the country treat Kenyans, the locals, very badly, including killing locals. They also injure ordinary people. You know, there should be forgiveness. If you want to be forgiven, you must show your desire to be forgiven. The British have not apologized. And the first thing, or the first step that needs to be taken, is to apologize, to say, forgive me, and then I will decide whether to forgive you or not.
A huge problem for Kenya is our dependence on the IMF and the World Bank. It becomes very difficult, very, very difficult when your government dances to the tune of the IMF, dances to every tune, even if it is very outdated, but still continues to dance. It's difficult. I hope that the future generation, the young generation now, will see the need to move away from the IMF and the World Bank and their kind of financial agreements, because it is robbery.
There are many conflicts throughout Africa, so Kenya has tried to be at the forefront to try to become a regional mediator to unite these people. If you go outside, you will feel that it's very hot there. If our brothers across Africa are fighting, it will become much hotter. We don't want people to fight. We want them to sit down and resolve everything diplomatically.
These are the thoughts from our African friends. They also want peace and respect, chaos and orders from above. The truth from Africa is obviously not what the West wants to hear. However, the world is speaking louder about it. It shares Minsk's values for honest politics, normal relations, and a fair world order. In the next issue, another continent.
Goodbye.